It's time to ignite your soul and unlock your full potential. Join us on Beneath the Helmet, the podcast exploring firefighters' health and wellness. Hosted by retired Fire Chief Arjuna George, our podcast is the perfect place to start your journey towards becoming the best version of yourself. So come on, let's join the conversation and find out what sets your soul on fire.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Episode number 11. Today, I'm joined with a special guest, friend, and fellow fire service author, Bradley Davidson. In this episode, Bradley's going to share some stories around moral injury, personal grounding, self-care, box breathing, his sleep hygiene, as well as his newly released book, Flames of the Fire, Firefighting Amidst the Explosions. Brad has already 40 years in the fire service, from municipal to industrial firefighting. Over his long career, he witnessed lots of tragedy, but also enjoyed the experience. He shares his thoughts on Gary Klein's recognition, prime decision-making, and shares stories about one of his mentors, as well as mine, Chief Brunasini. This podcast is sponsored by Silver Arrow Coaching and Consulting, burnout and resilience coaching for high performers, specializing in the fire service with fire chief and firefighter coaching. For more information on Silver Arrow, please reach out to www.silverarrowco.com. So please sit back, enjoy this episode with Bradley Davidson as he shares his stories in industrial firefighting and his new book, Flames of the Fire. Until next time, stay well. All right, everyone. We got Brad Davidson on the air today with us on Beneath the Helmet show. New author, as well as a former firefighter. So, Brad, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Arjuna. It's an honor to be on your show.
Thank you. Thank you. We've had the privilege of being on a couple shows together, and I just thought it would be nice to, since your new book is out, to kind of go through that and talk about your kind of story about who you are as a person. So maybe let's start with, who is Brad? Tell us your story of where you came from and what brought you to where you are today.
I was born and raised in Flin Flon, Manitoba, and have approximately 40 years in the fire service in different capacities. And when I first started with the fire service, I actually lived at the fire hall in Flin Flon while I worked at the mine here. And then after approximately 10 years, I joined the industrial fire department and was two-hatter with industrial and municipal. And then I went straight industrial. I left the fire hall and this municipal fire hall when I got married, started a family, of course. And little did I realize I was jumping from the frying pan into the fire when I went from the municipal to the industrial.
So what's the difference between municipal fire and industrial? Can you give us a little snapshot of how it so differs from each other?
On the residential side, there might be people that will probably disagree with me, but you almost know what to expect with the size of the buildings, and you have foreknowledge of what you're going to be up against and the possible hazards and risks. On the industrial side, it's just a whole lot bigger anticipated risks and variables, like molten metal, molten sulfur, bulk oxygen storage, bulk propane storage, high pressure steam, and the list goes on. And the transportation of acid and refrigerant gases and that kind of thing. And I was lucky to be handpicked for the hazmat team, and I think that was an immensely good thing for me, because we were actually just surrounded with so many nasty chemicals under the right situation.
I imagine the frequencies. I've never worked in any industrial environment, so I'm guessing, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm guessing that the frequency of fires is less, but maybe the outcome is greater. Is that fair to say? Or
when I first went industrial, we had a lot of fires. I believe it was 1992. We had 72 that made it to our reports, but I think that we could have easily multiplied that by 3 or 4, because there's lots of fires that, say, if I was on shift, I put out myself rather than paging the guys out. If I had the capacity to do that, I did that. And also in 1992, we also transported sick and injured people to the hospital and treated them where we could. And in 1992, we had 1,800 industrial accidents, and we're having a fatal approximately every 18 months for a number of years.
Wow. What brought you to retiring from the fire service?
What brought me to retiring from the fire service? Actually, I wanted to get 40 years was my marker. I wanted to get 40 years in, and I started getting plagued by injuries and arthritis and that kind of thing from previous injuries probably that I received on fires. When you're on the fire scene, you can take quite a beating up, but you just dust yourself off and keep going. But I think as you get older, they start to catch up to you a little bit.
Well, I know you just came out with a brand new book. It's highlighted behind there, or the fighting amidst the explosions, flames of the fire. What did you learn about yourself writing this book?
Arjuna, I'm not sure if I shared with you before, but then maybe I did. I had a collection of short stories and short experiences, not necessarily in a journal, but where I'd started writing a book and stopped, started and stopped, because a lot of the experiences I thought are really unique. And during the tenure that we were just super busy with all kinds of calls and rescues and hazmat incidents, it was a bit overwhelming at the time. But now I realize it was actually valuable experience that a lot of younger firefighters just won't get.
Did you learn about yourself through this process? Any kind of nuggets revealed its head that maybe you
Yeah.
forgot about it or didn't know about? Or
Yeah. And now that you mentioned this, the recognition, prime decision making, and situational awareness, I mentioned them in the book. The recognition, prime decision making model by Gary Klein. I was using it, but not even realizing that I was acting in that capacity. But it really saved my bacon a few times. And one time in particular was when I was at the furnace just prior to the explosion, or one of the explosions there, as we had about a dozen or so. But the particular one was a mass casualty incident. And I was at this furnace doing a 360 safety tour, and I got to the outer perimeter as far as I could go on that furnace. And I looked around and I just got the feeling that something wasn't right. And I couldn't put my finger on it, but just from my prior experience with molten metal and fires, and I just had a bad feeling. And it was like a little voice was telling me to book it out of there. And I did. And shortly after I got back, and when I left, I felt relieved and I couldn't put my finger on it. But when I got back to the office, a series of explosions had happened there. And I think if it wasn't for that hard drive that you accumulate, I could have been part of that. I could have been a victim in that scenario. And there was others the same way. And I think that's a big one. Just you don't realize what you don't and what you're learning, because you're learning all the time. And when you're younger, you might run into fires or hazardous situations. But when you get a little older, you walk.
yeah, how would you describe the recognition, prime decision making? What's for maybe people who are listening are quite not familiar with that term? How would you summarize what that means to you?
The simplest way to describe it, I think, is it's like you have your own hard drive, and each call you're learning something. Each training session you're learning something. Well, you're not learning on the job or being trained on the job. You're reading about other firefighters' experiences, and you're collecting all that information. And whether you realize it or not, you start to fill up that hard drive, so that, say you go to a molten metal spill and you know what to expect, how it's going to act, the hazards, what to do, what not to do. And I use that often on medical calls as well. In one particular instance, there was a guy having a heart attack and nobody realized it except me. And we end up saving his life. But there's other calls too that we got called to that there's a lot of panic going on. And when I took a look at the guy, like he's got good color, he's breathing, he's going around under his own steam. There's nothing to panic about. You know what I mean? He's got good circulation. But this other guy that was having a heart attack, the opposite was true. He was having trouble breathing. He looked clammy. He started describing all the classical signs and symptoms. And it puts you in a tough spot when you're not prepared for it.
In writing this book, why was it important for you to write this book?
I think it was important for me because we spend our career, at least I did, always thinking, what's the worst that can happen? When you're going into a call, what's the worst thing that can happen while I'm here? You start that train of thought, and then you experience some actually really bad calls. So what you're thinking actually comes true. So after a bad call, say loss of life or something like that, you start to concentrate more maybe on the negative stuff, and you don't give yourself a pat on the back for all the good saves you made and all the influences that you had in a positive way. And it was important for me to write the book so that it wasn't just all bad. There was a lot of good there where you just happened to be at the right time, at the right place. In one part of the book, I even described I had a migraine that stayed at work. I shouldn't have been at work, but because of my migraine, I saved another guy's life that was in a diabetic coma. So
Meant to be there that day.
yeah. I think it's remembering not just the bad calls and the hairy stuff, is remembering the good outcomes, the influences that you made. And that's why you're in the job. You know,
I couldn't agree more. Tell us a little bit about your writing process. You said you had journals and notes from a long time ago and you compiled it. Is that essentially what the book is about? Is your journal entries put into a nonfiction book?
yeah, there was journal entries, but it was actually all in my head the whole time. And I guess the book actually describes my journey. It's about me, but yet it's not about me. I describe the victims that we helped out. Describe scary times we had with our children, where because of the medical training that I had, I could influence the outcome there. And the people that I met, like life has a weird way of turning out for in the good in a lot of ways. Like nobody understood my journey of lifelong education.
Mm.
They said, "Why are you doing this? Because if you're doing this, you must want this, and if you're studying that, that means you must want." And I often told people I don't really have a goal per se. I just want to learn all about the craft that I can, and to create opportunities. We're in a business we were in a business that could kill us easily. So why not try find out all you can, learn all you can about it? And that's what I did starting in approximately 2010.
I know you've been out of the fire service operationally, but I know from speaking with you in the past, and I know you're a lifelong learner still in the fire service to this day in different associations and partnerships and writing a book about the fire service. And that's something to be commendable about that you're still providing back to the fire service, even though you've retired from it.
Yeah, for a period of time when I retired and we started camping at the lake, I didn't want to hear pager. I didn't want to hear the word fire. I just wanted peace and quiet out there, and I got that. But then after, you feel like you still owe a debt to the service that actually treated you so well, even though you may have been injured at different times in the process. And that knowledge that you can maybe pass along to younger guys that are just new to the service and maybe don't know what to expect. They, like myself, when I joined, I wanted to be on the nozzle and kick indoors. And I did that, but there's a lot more to that you don't realize that you signed up for.
Yeah, so I know many of the stories in your book are pretty traumatic and kind of life changing in many ways for people who lost their lives as well as you as the responder. How did witnessing that and being part of that affect you as a person, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, physically?
I was injured. I had a post-traumatic stress injury and also a moral injury. So sometimes in the service, as you know, we deal with things that are not normal for other people. And you see horrific things, and you really don't have a toolbox at the time to ground yourself after. And that happened on some calls. At the time, I didn't know what was happening, but the training, the preparation for that, like I say, you don't realize what you sign up for, kind of thing. And looking back, I wouldn't change a thing, like, because it was all fascinating in a way,
It's made you who you are today.
right? I often refer back to Chief Alan Brunacini, Chief Bruno. It was like an aha moment for me when he just started describing his customer service model. He relied more on his officers to be customer service oriented more than he relied on them being tactically brilliant. And I made a real comparison to my experience there, because at these fires where there were fatal fires and people are having the worst day of their lives, I that really wasn't my department, customer service. Maybe it wasn't an indirect way, but all I knew was really the tactical part. So I thought that was a missing that I'd never been taught. And a lot of firefighters, if they haven't been taught, they should, because you're serving Mrs. Smith, and the only thing important to her is not necessarily your tactical brilliance, as Bruno would say. It's pets, pills, pictures, and slippers.
Totally. Oh, yeah. His words and his wisdom still live on heavy in my heart for sure.
Yeah.
He was the guru of the fire service, in my opinion, for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And in the book, I described the first time I heard his name. And I think it was a chief and assistant chief arguing on the other side of the pumper when I was mopping the floor. And one of them said, don't be giving me any of that into those Chief Brunicinism, and it stuck. It's just like, why are they arguing about Chief Bruno and who is he? And it wasn't until years later that I found out what an immense impact he had on the fire service. And one of my dreams was being able to meet him, go to his class, and I got to do that.
That's
And
fantastic.
when I did meet him, I actually gave him a cheap shot about the truck that he built for the last 30 years.
Is Mac?
Yeah, the Big Mac and his
Yeah,
grad.
yeah, yeah. It's beautiful.
Of course, he played along with me, and he played along with me when I gave him that cheap shot, and it was out of my mouth before I could think about it. But it was everybody was laughing, and he come over. He said, "Davidson," he said, "I could send your sorry butt right back across that border." And
Yeah,
it was,
such an important message, but what a relaxed and chill leader he was for sure. Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
So you mentioned a little bit ago, you mentioned the word moral injury. And I know in my book, I talk about that as well. And I think that's something that was near and dear to my heart of why I had to retire early as well. Define how moral injury impacted your life.
I think I was morally injured on at least one occasion, and being the major explosion that I had a near miss with and that I responded to. It got down to the point I'd witnessed a lot of fatal fires and injured people. And to me, after a while, I drew a hard line. A lot of these people that are getting injured at work or at the fires at work were friends of mine. In the major explosion, a lot of the guys working actually on the furnace were guys that I grew up with or worked with at one time at the mine. So I think even before then, I was drawing a hard line and saying, if there's a fire hazard or a safety hazard and I don't go after it and try to get it fixed, that means one of my friends who've already been injured once could get re-injured or killed. Fire safety and the fire code become vitally important for me going forward. And I took a lot of heat and kickback from the management at the time because who are you, Brad? You're just a firefighter type of thing. And it was really important to me because, like I said, seen enough tragedy and whatnot that it was really important that we try to prevent that. And like in the book I described, there was a fire I was trying to prevent in a conveyor way. And it's not because I was a rocket scientist. It was common sense safety hazards that kept starting fires there. And I knew that if we had a serious enough one there, our firefighters could be badly injured and or our company could be shut down. And so I got actually pretty outspoken about trying to stop a fire there. And my job was threatened a couple of times. And I laugh about it now, but my job was threatened a couple of times because I was putting too much heat on everybody. But ultimately we had while I was on vacation, that the conveyor way burned down and the cost of the fire, it's estimated to me that they told me the costs were estimated at $7 million. And I was fighting for a $30,000 dual sprinkler system to prevent that.
Yeah, it's an angry moment. It's you've put your heart and soul into trying to prevent this fire and profit over people. And yeah, it's too bad. How's that industrial plant now? Is it still in operation or
It's shut down right now.
is it? Yeah.
It's closed. But I have to say, it wasn't all bad. The company that I was working for, we had to go through a culture change. We were having so many injuries and so many fires and a lot of hot work fires. But after a point of time, it just wasn't acceptable anymore. It wasn't acceptable on a business standpoint, and it wasn't acceptable provincially or federally. That kind of injury and fire rate was costing money and ultimately probably production. We actually turned that right around. So that was a good thing, but I was part of that process. I think it was tough on everybody.
Is that what sparked your interest into fire investigation as well?
Somewhat. I was actually, when I was living at the fire hall in Flin Flon, Manitoba, and with the municipal department, the assistant fire commissioner came in a couple of times and gave us a couple of seminars on intro to fire investigation and arson investigation. And I still remember those like they were yesterday. And I think he hooked me there in a big way because I knew when he finished that second seminar that one day I was going to figure out how I was going to be able to take that training and meet the qualifications to do that professionally. Plus, during the fires that we had at the mine, I wrote a lot of reports and a lot of them were kicked back or thrown in the garbage because I was told they're not a professional opinion. You don't have the qualifications to back up what you're saying. That became important to me to be able to put some qualifications behind my reports. Not not so Brad says you have to do this, so you have to. But I would say in the code, it recommends you do this. And going forward, I'd recommend that you follow the code. And I could live with that because then they knew what the requirements were. And if they didn't follow the requirements, that kind of let me off the hook kind of thing. 'Cause I did all I could, told them what the requirements were. And if they didn't do it, I tried.
Yeah. You've done your piece and trying to educate them and doing the best that you can. But yeah, at the end, decision making is in their hands. Oh, 40 years in the fire service, amazing accomplishment, lots of tragedy, lots of good times. What are some of the techniques you've used over the last number of years to maintain a good well-being for yourself? Any strategies you want to share with the listeners?
Yeah, certainly. I think for a while, I really didn't have a good work life balance. Although lifelong education is a good thing, you have to balance it with things you enjoy, things that let you get away from the service kind of thing. And sleep hygiene. We're told early on that you got to get so many hours sleep each night. And you think, yeah, that's for everybody else, but we're firefighters, can do it on 2 hours. And you start doing that for a lifetime while you're working shift work. And pretty soon you're not coping. You're making withdrawals all the time. And actually, one time I went to a sleep clinic and they told me I had no REM sleep. So I was sleeping, but at such a poor quality, I had no REM at all. So that was the first time I realized I had a problem. And I did have bad sleep hygiene then. And it's something I don't struggle with, but I a lot time to get a proper sleep, whether I have a good sleep or a bad sleep. I still go to bed at a regular time and try to do everything to have a proper sleep hygiene, and it helps.
So what's your nighttime routine to get you ready for a good night's sleep?
I have a Apple Watch here, and on my iPhone unit, I could be watching a television show or doing something, and I'll get a reminder. Like it's sick that I go to bed so early, but I go to bed pretty early, and I get a reminder saying, "Hey, you should be going."
That's a good idea.
And so I can try stick to that. I know when I don't stick to it right away, I feel it.
So what made you make a shift in your well-being, your life balance? What was that? Was there a moment in time that said, my work-life balance is off balance?
Yeah, I think it was when I started suffering. I was having problems sleeping. Well, I had actually had chronic sleeping problems. As I mentioned before, I started to get injuries and aches and pains that I never had before. And it was more having an awareness that I needed professional help with the sleep hygiene. And I got that, and that helped a lot. And other than that, I actually talked to some professionals that deal with moral injury, post traumatic stress injury, and they had tips that help, like grounding. And I mentioned box breathing. Quite often in the middle of my workday, I'd have to go to the hospital and get a prescription or something. It'd be during my work day. On lunch, I'd run over to the hospital to try to get this done, and my blood pressure would be just crazy. And they'd say, "Well, you can't go back to work like this. Your blood pressure is too high." And I would, lots of times, unbeknownst to them, I would practice this box breathing. I would bring down my level of stress and my blood pressure, and they'd come back 5 or 10 minutes later, and they'd say, "What do you do?" And I'd say, "It's just a little trick that I learned." I said, "Box breathing is something we should be doing more of during your work day, or say a day that you have several fire calls or something. You might be a lot more anxious and stressed out than you realize. And that box breathing just brings you back and grounds you so that you're breathing properly." And
Yeah, it's such a simple process, isn't it? And really, you can do it anywhere. You can do it in the fire truck. You could do it in your office. You could do it maybe even on the fire ground at some moments in time. I know Navy SEALs do it while they're in action. So
that's right.
it is potential to be able to do it on the fire ground and maintain a good balance while your whole body and your mind's under stress from fighting the fire. So
Like,
box breathing, want to give us just a quick little summary? I think most people probably are familiar with it, but how do you do box breathing? Anything different or special?
I use a 4-4 cycle. I breathe in on the count of four, hold it to count of four, exhale to the count of 4, breathe in to the count of 4, and I just keep repeating that. And it works. I'm not sure if it's because you're much more conscious of your breathing, or you're breathing at intervals with longer breaths and longer inhales, but it actually works quite good. And like you say, it's simple.
Totally. Great. Beautiful. Any other self-care tactics or strategies that you have implemented over the years for yourself?
When this may sound silly, but when I retired, I wanted a chocolate lab just to hang out with, whether we were camping or whatnot. And just prior to me retiring, I got the chocolate lab. It keeps me more active when I don't feel like being active.
The dog takes you for a walk.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's a good thing, because sometimes with a post-traumatic stress injury, people sometimes, I know myself included, if you start to suffer, you want to isolate. And that's the wrong thing to do. You have to get out and move around
Yeah, that's a good
and
point.
yeah, do that kind of thing. The
Good point.
fresh air.
Oh, there's so many benefits of having, well, going outside, getting in nature, going for walks, getting exercise. But I don't know, something magical about doing it with a four-legged friend for sure.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Like one of the favorite things I like to do in the summer besides fish is just where we camp at the Paradise Lodge. I just actually sit and I like to watch the eagles out there. They're amazing. There's usually more than one, and occasionally a duck or goose will make a mistake, and the fight is on, or a loon, I
Yeah.
guess,
Yeah.
and the fight is on. That gets.
Yeah.
But I really enjoy the peace and quiet. Oh,
Oh, you deserve it. You mentioned the word grounding. And I think from my experience talking to people, I wouldn't say a lot of people truly understand what grounding means, or it's different for everybody. What would be your definition of being grounded?
I was taught the technique after we're doing some work on ourselves around PTSI and more injuries, and I think the instructor was doing that because the work we were doing was really hard mentally, I think. And a funny story, we were doing this work and I went back to my room for lunch. And incidentally, there was the Humboldt hockey team bus crashers on, and I couldn't watch it because it was a mass casualty incident. And that's something that I went through. So anyway, I shut the TV off and I practiced this grounding technique that we were taught, and I fell asleep.
That's pretty grounded.
And they had to come wake me up.
What was the technique?
It's just controlled breathing and letting your body feel the gravity kind of thing, and being aware just of your surroundings and kind of thing. It's even hard for me to describe, but it worked. Like, it worked very well.
Isn't it so funny that the simplest things in life can help us in so many ways, like breathing, just sitting there in the moment,
Yeah.
peaceful, concentrating on your breathing, and you're grounded, and you feel like $1,000,000 after that, or you fall asleep. Yeah, so
Right.
funny. Yeah,
Yeah. And I think that's part of it. Those techniques are, like you say, so simple. It's almost deceiving. Like, we're always told going back to sleep's so important. You need X amount of hours. And when you start to live a life where you think, we had a fire last night, so I got 2 hours, I'm good. But you don't ever really get that back.
yeah. Once you're in that sleep deficit, it's going to be a challenge climbing out of that and restoring your sleep. I couldn't agree more that sleep for myself has been one of the key routines and places where I put a lot of effort into it to make sure that my sleep is top notch. I track it every day. I do lots of rituals at night to make sure that's such as a cold room, dark room,
Yep.
no lights on anywhere. Try to minimize screen time, which is probably my weakest link right now. But yeah, there's so many things that you can do to line yourself up for a good night's sleep. Even if you're on shift work, there's things you can do to make that happen.
Yeah, I'm like you, Arjuna. I also track it. I have an app on my phone that tracks the quality. So I pay particular attention to the quality. And if I don't have if I get low quality, then I'm starting to wonder why. Did I drink enough water? Did I get out and about enough? Is there something that's on the brain that I need to deal with or something? But
Yeah, it's a good point because I think the quality is something that I know for myself. I got 7 hours, I got 8 hours of sleep, but until I started tracking it and actually monitoring it, I really had no idea how the quality of my sleep was, though.
Exactly.
I sleep for 8 hours, wake up all groggy, and or wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, can't go back to sleep. But still, my phone says, "Oh, you slept 8 hours. Good job." Yeah, the quality is maybe even more important than the hours. But yeah, that's definitely the REM, the deep sleep,
Yep.
the latency, how long it takes you to get to sleep. Those are all key factors into your health. And sleep really is linked to the most health challenges that people have, is probably linked to somehow of sleep or sleep hygiene.
I believe that.
So, what message? You got lots of experience, 40 years once again. You've written a book now to share your story. What nuggets would you love the audience to hear that would maybe help them recover from stress, from PTSI, from the traumatic injuries they see in the fire service? Just live a healthier life as a firefighter. What would be some nuggets you'd like to share?
I think practicing self-care as much as you can. And something that's been on my mind a lot lately is there was traumatic experiences. There was a PTSI and moral entry. However, as first responders, firefighters, we don't, sometimes we really excel under time pressures and emergencies. We're in the pocket and it feels good. Like it's, I don't know how to describe it, Arjuna. Sometimes when you're behind the wheel, say the pumper or something, and you have the sirens going and you know exactly where you're going and what your job is when you arrive there, it doesn't feel bad. It
Mm.
doesn't, it's not the bad kind of stress. It's the good kind of stress. And I think where firefighters sometimes get messed up, which could very easily happen to me, and I think actually did, is you put duty over self. Because I know that even if we got 2 hours sleep, or we have a PTSI, or maybe we have a physical injury, we still want to get out there and serve, even though we may be injured and not be able to serve in our full capacity. And I think that kind of sums it up. I think we're put together so we put duty over self. And there again, there's got to be a balance, right?
Yeah, I think it's ingrained in us that the customer always comes first, customer being whoever we're protecting and saving. But really, just like going into a structure, we go and make sure that we're fully equipped in our PPE and our SCBA. We don't go in with jeans on. The same kind of attitude. We should be going in with a high mental capacity, a high physical capacity, rest, sleep, nutrition, hydration, and then we can go and do our job very well.
Yeah. And one other thing in the lifelong journey of education, at the time, it was critically important that I come out at the top 5% of the class. Not only did I do well, but I got good marks and I absolutely got the piece of birch bark on the wall, so to speak. But at the end of the day, now when I reflect back on it, I met some really incredible people. And it's those kind of things I treasure, I think, just as much or more now than I did then. And a funny story to, if we're getting close to closing, a funny story, I met a bomb tech, like I mentioned in the book, from the military. And I thought, man, what I do is nothing compared to what he does. And as I described in the book, after a short conversation, he swung his arm in a wide arc and he pointed right at me and he said, yeah, but you firefighters are nuts. I didn't know what to think by, about what he said. And I said, what do you mean by that? He said, well, running into a burning building is just crazy. And he was a bomb.
Yeah. Walking up to a bomb that's way to blow up is, it's freaky too. Yeah. Oh, there's tons of professions that I consider to be, whew, I would never want to do that job.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. They probably say the same to us. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, in closing, how can people find out more about Brad, your book, and connect with you if they want to? Where can they purchase it?
It's on Amazon worldwide, Barnes and Noble, Walmart, the USA, Booktopia, Ape Books. I have a website, bradleydavidson.com. I'm on the social media. I watch Amazon pretty close to make sure that they have the stock and the hardcover and the Kindle version and the paperback.
Great.
Probably easiest for Canadians.
Great. Excellent. It's lots of opportunities there for people to snag a copy. And it just was released a couple weeks ago?
April 21st.
April 21st, 2023. It was released. Nice. Beautiful. And I love the cover and the size of the book. I think it's a unique size and shape. So very attractive looking. So
Yeah, it's a relief to have it out.
yeah, well done. It's an accomplishment to be a published author. So well done.
Thanks, Arjuna.
Well, Brad, it's been a real honor. We've connected over the last number of years, and only in the last, I would say, 6 months to a year, we've met several times and connected
Right.
on Zoom. So you live across the country. I'm out in BC or in Manitoba. It's great to be able to connect with you like this and share our stories and our lessons learned with our community. So I appreciate that.
Thanks, Arjuna. It's been a real pleasure being on your podcast and interacting with you on so many different levels. And I certainly enjoyed reading your book as well.
Oh, appreciate that. Thank you. All right, everyone. Bradley Davidson, check him out and check out his new book, Flames of the Fire.
Flames of the Fire, firefighting amid explosions.
Fantastic. All right, everyone. Stay well.
Thank you for tuning in to Beneath the Helmet. We hope that this podcast has provided you with valuable insights into the world of firefighters' health and wellness. Remember, caring for your physical, mental, and spiritual well-being is crucial to achieving optimal performance. Join us next time on Beneath the Helmet for more inspiring conversations. Until then, stay well.